Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, hazardous weather graphic. Got a flood watch remains out, actually kicked into effect today, and remains out through Wednesday afternoon for the Kenai portions of the western Kenai Peninsula. For the Kenai River at Kenai Keys is the exact location there for possible flooding due to all the rain that's fallen, mostly on the east side of the peninsula. There's been some also on the west side, but it's due to recent rainfall, and potential for flooding exists at least into Wednesday, the way it looks at this point in time. Otherwise, no other watches, advisories, or warnings around the state for the next day or so. Satellites showing a lot of kind of disorganized clouds, loose clouds up over the interior today, with most of the precipitation occurring over the western part of the state, but it's all very on the light side, anywhere from a few hundredths to maybe a tenth of an inch. The exception being up at Tin City. They had 2/3 of an inch in the last 12 hours, and Sleepy at 2/10 of an inch, and those were the two heavier rainfall amounts out west there. Otherwise, rainfall with a band of moisture in across south central Alaska today. That brought about 1/3 of an inch to the North Gulf Coast, and lesser amounts over the inland areas. And Yakutat, with the trough moving in off the Pacific there, picked up about 1/2 an inch of rain, and then it kind of tapers off as you head east and southeast. Sitka only picking up 1/3 of an inch of precipitation, while Juneau just had 1/100th and Ketchikan 7/100ths. So all the heavier rains on the north coast there, but winds are on the light side. Otherwise, some showers around Kodiak Island, and it was clearing over the interior, especially the central and eastern interior today, with dry conditions once again, and temperatures still mild, but not as mild as they have been the last couple of days. Out west, northerly flow over the Bering Sea, carrying surges of moisture southward with it in the form of light rain, fog, or drizzle, or a combination of the three with some showers thrown in, and little, if any, in the way of clearing. Could have been some around Adak, Atka possibly, maybe even Bristol Bay. But showers scattered along the Alaska Peninsula as the next system down to the southwest there is far enough to the south, not really affecting the peninsula at all, but will affect Kodiak Island later tonight as it moves northeastward. You'll be back into the rain there with that easterly flow on the northwest quadrant of that low as it tracks up to the northeast into the Gulf. And late tonight, winds will be increasing toward morning, actually, along the North Gulf Coast, along with the rainfall. And it'll stay kind of wet over the Panhandle and unsettled tonight with light winds. The interior Copper River Basin will remain dry. Susitna Valley dry. Winds should diminish a little bit from the 35-mile-an-hour gusts at Palmer, and also winds will continue to come down in the eastern Alaska range. Still had a peak gust 51 miles an hour at Delta Junction today, and 35 miles an hour at Gulkana, or actually up near 40. Otherwise, those will come down tonight. Chance of rain or mixed precipitation up along the northern interior to the Brooks Range, especially out to the west there along mountain areas. And chance of moisture, Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, and Lotto Hills. Scattered showers over the southwest interior. Pribilofs look cloudy with occasional rain or drizzle or fog. And another trough swinging down across the Aleutians there. Look for periods of rain with that to increase, light rain. And also northerly winds will be picking up a little bit there behind that trough, as we'll see higher pressure building in over the Bering Sea for tomorrow. And between the lower pressure over the mainland area and then the Gulf and the weak trough there from Kotzebue Sound down along the southwest coast, in between the high and that low, there'll be a little bit of an increase in gradient there from the Russian Far East areas down across western St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew Island, the Pribilofs to Atka and Unalaska Island areas, eastern Aleutians. So winds will be increasing, but probably won't see gusts much more than 35 miles an hour at most, with periods of light rain, fog, and drizzle. Lighter winds out to the west toward Chimney with maybe some afternoon clearing. And for the Alaska Peninsula, still scattered showers possible tomorrow with light winds, but wind increasing there for Kodiak Island as well as the North Gulf Coast. Gale warnings coming in with increasing moderate to heavy amounts of rain associated with it. And also later in the day, later in the afternoon, look for the winds to increase, probably going to gale force on the north coast of the Panhandle tomorrow afternoon. Take a little longer on the south coast with increasing rain as well, and that spreads all the way to the border or just to the east. Otherwise, the Sitna Valley, from northern Cook Inlet actually, dry conditions even for the Matanuska Valley, definitely in the central and eastern interior, northern Copper River Basin across the Brooks Range there, upper Tanana Valley to the Yukon Flats. Could see some clearing tomorrow afternoon or throughout the day. Should be basically dry on the Arctic coast with some shower activity over the Brooks Range, especially back to the low center there over Kotzebue Sound, actually centered near Shishmaref. And then for Monday, that low's gone, actually weakens into a trough, and they kind of just drop down the eastern side of that ridge out over the Bering Sea, and with it bringing breezy conditions with periods of light rain, fog, and drizzle with it. Otherwise dry at other times. For the western Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, and Pribilofs, just grazing the southwest coast. And a weakening front brings periods of rain and some wind over the northern Panhandle, but nothing too terribly strong. Lynn Canal could see gusts 35 miles an hour or so, but lighter down to the south. And low pressure weakening there over the Kenai Peninsula, south central Alaska. That'll be good for clouds and a few showers, nothing too significant there. And the eastern central interior again, mostly dry with some clearing. And it looks like a little bit colder air coming down on the north slope there. Could produce some light snow from the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline across the north slope back to the western Arctic coast. Kind of a mixed rain and snow shower condition south or the western Brooks Range. And from there, going to the low temperatures for tonight, rather mild over the southeast coast with 45 to 50 degree range for those temperatures tonight for the lows. Copper River Basin, 35 to 40, winds diminishing, might let it drop a little farther than that, and then down near or just under the frost point there from Northway Tok on up to Eagle, and otherwise upper 30s for the Tanana Valley. And Susitna Valley could drop into the upper 30s, as well as the Kuskokwim Valley, but the Bristol Bay Zone, lower 40s, mid-40s Kodiak Island, and lower to mid-40s for the Alaska Peninsula Aleutians and Pribilofs, mid-30s St. Lawrence Island, and 30s to near 40 there for the Seward Peninsula, with Nome forecast low at 40 even, and lower 40s for the lower Yukon River Valley and the Delta there, with lower 30s eastern Beaufort Sea coast, or all along the Beaufort Sea coast, and maybe down a shade cooler over the north slope, but lower to mid 30s for the Brooks Range. Highs for tomorrow in the 50s, lower to mid for the upper Yukon Valley to mid 50s as you head southwest there, and near 50 southwest interior, upper 40s along the coast, Pribilofs, upper 40s for the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, near or into the lower 50s Kodiak Island and Bristol Bay, lower to mid 50s south central Alaska, upper 50s around the greater Fairbanks area, and lower to mid 50s to or in the 50s, call it, warmest in the south over the Panhandle. They'll be followed by lows on Monday morning, not much different from what they will be Sunday morning. Upper 40s, lower 50s for the Panhandle, mid 30s in the Copper River Basin. Otherwise, generally 30s over much of the central and southern interior, but near 40 for the Bristol Bay area, Iliamna, mid 40s Kodiak Island, lower to mid 40s Kenai Peninsula, North Gulf Coast. About the same for the Alaska Peninsula and Pribilofs, upper or mid 40s for the western Aleutians. And the highs Monday afternoon, 50s over the Panhandle, mid 50s Kodiak Island, lower to mid 50s again south central Alaska, and lower 30s for the Arctic coast and North Slope.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather for tomorrow morning, a huge area of IFR from the Arctic Ocean across the most of the North Slope and Arctic coast and the central western Brooks Range, part of the Koyukuk, all of the Kobuk Valley, all of the western interior from the Kuskokwim Valley area west out to the coast and into the eastern Bering Sea all the way to Adak-Atka, Fox Islands, and part of the Seward Peninsula kind of in the marginal to IFR zone there. But IFR up across Kodiak Island, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, and then right down along the coast of the Panhandle with marginal VFR over the inside waters. VFR from northern Copper River Basin up into the Tanana Valley, upper Yukon Valley areas, and on down toward Tanana. and some IFR on the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range and roughly the southern slopes of the Central Range. And for the afternoon, that goes VFR for most of the Alaska Range except west of Cook Inlet there, and also marginal VFR for Bristol Bay, but marginal VFR, Pribilof Islands up to the southwest coast and into the central interior, IFR into the upper Yukon Valley, Koyukuk, Kobuk Valley, Seward Peninsula, all of the North Slope, Brooks Range, and Arctic Coast, and just to about St. Lawrence Island. Then just a small swath of marginal VFR there across St. Matthew Island down to AKwx with VFR for the western Aleutians and Bering Sea. And then for the Monday morning outlook, IFR there, central eastern panhandle, becoming VFR for the central and south coastal areas. Marginal VFR on the north coast. IFR from Yakutat over to about Cordova. And then looks like probably north of Valdez, IFR covering all of the Copper River Basin across the eastern Alaska Range, just about up to Eagle. And then a little bit of a break there, and then more IFR for the Brooks Range, Upper Yukon Valley, North Slope Arctic Coast, northwest coastal areas, Kotzebue Sound, southern Seward Peninsula marginal, and northeast Bristol Bay marginal VFR. Otherwise, still pretty good area of IFR for the western interior, down to the Alaska Range, and that swath of VFR that's farther west tomorrow, moves eastward on Monday to the Pribilofs and AKwx, followed by more IFR. And that next batch IFR I just spoke of, that pushes into ADAC on Monday afternoon, marginal VFR encroaching over Atka. VFR, though, for the Pribilof, St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island, Unmak, and Unalaska Islands. Or marginal VFR, Alaska Peninsula, Northern Panhandle, and areas of VFR, marginal VFR, and IFR for the eastern interior, as well as the northern sections, but pretty well solid IFR for the North Slope on out to the Arctic coast and the Brooks Range into the Arctic Ocean. And then for Passes Anatuvik, IFR looks pretty good for IFR conditions for Adigan as well. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR. And for Rainy, marginal VFR as well. Windy, though, looks like a VFR kind of day for that pass as well as Isabel. And then moisture coming in we'll start out VFR from Mentasta, and then with the moisture coming in, possibly going marginal VFR, especially southern entrance in the afternoon. Tanita, occasionally marginal, and for Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels, about 4,000 feet for the most part over the southeast coast, and much of the interior, 6,000 feet way up to the northeast there, and then 2,000 feet, northern Bering, 4,000 to the south. And at the surface, right along the Brooks Range, give or take, for tomorrow morning. And for icing, considerable moderate rime icing there. You can see it stretched out from Kodiak Island, southern Kenai Peninsula, into most of Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, and then right on down to the almost to the south coast of the Panhandle. Otherwise, out west, light to very isolated areas of light to very isolated moderate icing there, light to moderate icing over the west. And for the jet stream, see several upper level lows here at 18,000 feet from just north of the Fox Islands all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast, and then the 33,000 foot wind flow speed maxes there. You can see the jet well south of the area, northerly 65 to 70 western Bering Sea, and then that 100 knot jet kind of almost getting to the coast of the Panhandle and diving southeast across the Queen Charlotte's. And for 9,000 feet, about the same pattern there, with the strongest winds well south of the area, cutting in just south of the Panhandle, and 35 knots or less for the central Aleutians. And turbulence-wise, moderate chop for the North Gulf Coast and Panhandle.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the earth and grows our food. While the sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the sun doesn't stay at the sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. And this is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
The GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy. And then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car, except for when I push the button, it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button, it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from the space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I as a human being can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system's going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Coastal water forecast for the south coast. South winds 30 knots, good for small craft advisories with 11 to 12 foot seas. Clarence Strait southeast at 20 with 4 foot seas, and Stevens Passage south 15, seas 4 feet. South 15 northern inside waters there, including Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, and seas running at about 3 feet. Got 40 knot winds though for gale warnings on the eastern North Gulf Coast down toward Yakutat, 40 to 45 knot winds. And then for Monday, those winds from around to the southwest, 30 to 35 knots there on the extreme north coast of the Panhandle, and on down the coastline, winds diminish, as well as the seas a little bit. Small craft advisories on the north coast, and then southwest 15 to 20 on the south coast with seas up to 15 feet. Light winds for Clarence Strait, southerlies at 10, 20 knots for Stevens Passage. Small craft advisories for Lynn Canal with seas at 5 feet with those 25 knot southerly winds. Prince William Sound tomorrow, a little brisk on the winds there with northeasterlies sustained at 30 knots, seas at about 6 feet. Full gales on the North Gulf Coast from the east-northeast at 45 knots, seas up to 16 feet, and good gales for the Barren Islands, northeast sustained 40, 13-foot seas. Gale warning, Southern Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay, 35 knot winds there out of the north with 9 to 10 foot seas, and small craft advisories, Northern Cook Inlet for those 25 knot northerlies. And moving on to the next day, Monday, northwest winds come down, or they turn northwest and diminish to 10 to 15 knots with 2 foot seas for Cook Inlet. Small craft advisories for Kamishak Bay, west winds 30 knots. Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast, small craft advisories, westerlies at 25 and 30 knot westerlies there for the eastern North Gulf Coast. And for Prince William Sound, winds back down to 10 knots out of the west. Kodiak Island, gale warnings on the east side there for northwest 35 knot winds. Shelikof Strait 30 knot winds out of the northeast, and Sitkinak to Castle Cape northwest at 30. And south side of the peninsula there, westerlies 20 knots. Bering Sea side lighter north at 10, and Bristol Bay north winds 10 knots, seas 2 feet. And for Monday, Bristol Bay north winds at 20 with 4 foot seas. Small craft advisories, Alaska Peninsula northwest 25, seas at 10 feet. And Kodiak Island, westerlies 20 to 25 knots with 5 to 10 foot seas. For the Fox Islands, west-northwest, tomorrow 20 knots with 6 to 9 foot seas. The small craft advisories, Adak and Atka, northwest 25 to 30. And 30 knot winds out of the northwest for Amchitka, Shemya, and Kiska, and Attu will be northwest of 20. And then on on Monday for the western Aleutians, southwest at 30 knots. Chitka Island west 20, and for the central Aleutians, west-northwest 20 to 25 knots, and general pattern there of 25-knot northwest winds for the Fox Islands, with seas running 8 to 9 feet. And for the southwest coast, we'll start south of Nunivak Island there, 25 knots out of the southwest, blowing into Kuskokwim Bay with 3-foot seas. Otherwise, north winds 25 knots for the Pribilofs, St. Matthew Island, the Yukon Delta coast, and St. Lawrence Island, all at 25 knots out of the north with 8-foot seas. Norton Sound south at 10 with 3-foot seas. And then for the day Monday, small craft advisories now in Norton Sound, north winds 25 knots with 5-foot seas, and 30-knot northerlies there, St. Lawrence Island and along the Yukon Delta coast, and otherwise along the Kuskokwim Delta coastline, northwest at 25. Same thing for the Pribilof, small craft advisories, and northwest 25 for St. Matthew Island. Up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, pretty light variable winds tomorrow, I'll call 5 to 10 knots, pick your direction, seas 1 to 2 feet. And for the central coast, not much different, west at 10, seas 3 feet. 15-knot northerlies there on the western Arctic coast with north at 20 from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson to Wales. Small craft advisories, north winds at 25 knots. And then for the day Monday, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, north to northwest, 10 to 15 knots, 2 to 3-foot seas, north at about 15 on the central coast, and northerlies at 20 the west side. Small craft advisories, though, 25 to 30-knot winds from Cape Beaufort all the way down to Wales. For tonight, again, next system pushing rain and increasing wind into the southern Gulf of Alaska, and that'll be starting to show up late tonight along the North Gulf coast and the Panhandle, but more likely tomorrow. Gale force winds, especially on the north coast of the Panhandle, back around North Gulf coast, Prince William Sound, southern Cook Inlet, as we just saw, and Kodiak Island, wet and breezy with heavy rain once again, or rain increasing. Could be occasional heavy rain tomorrow night for the Panhandle. And then on Monday, that front weakens along the coast, keeps it wet, but everything winding down and dry over the interior, and no change out over the Aleutians, kind of breezy and occasional.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.